I'd love to help you get vulnerable. Let's get naked.
Hey everyone, I'm Anne. Welcome to the Let's Get Naked podcast, where we dive deep into vulnerability. In this space, we'll explore what triggers us, uncover the patterns holding us back, and discover how to take charge of our own growth. If you're ready to dig in, be vulnerable, and face the tough stuff, then buckle up. It's time to get naked. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about PTSD, the kind that firefighters and first responders carry home like smoke in their clothes. Not from one moment of trauma, but from years of chaos. From answering calls no one else wants to answer. From being the first on the scene when someone is dying, screaming, or already gone. From holding the line between life and death and pretending like it doesn't wear you down. It's not just the fires they run into, it's the ones they bring home in their head. We praise them as heroes, but no one talks about what it costs to be one. No one warns them that all those images, all that adrenaline, all that helplessness you try to ignore, it doesn't just go away. It builds, it calcifies, it haunts. PTSD creeps in like a silent intruder, and suddenly sleep is a battleground. Sounds are weapons. Your own thoughts, a minefield. But it's not just the firefighter who lives with PTSD, it's their family. It's the spouse who gets the short, clipped responses, the one who holds their breath during every shift and then holds back tears when the person who walks through the door barely feels like the one they married. It's the partner who absorbs the unspoken grief, the buried rage, the silence that screams louder than any siren. And yet, the hardest, bravest work isn't running into the fire, it's facing the one inside. The real courage comes when that firefighter finally says, I need help. When they step into therapy, when they open up even just a little, when they begin to unravel the knot of pain that's been choking them for years. That's not weakness, that's warrior-level bravery. Because healing, that's not passive, it's not some peaceful retreat. It's gritty, it's terrifying. It means revisiting the worst days of your life so they stop owning you. It means letting your guard down in a world that taught you to armor up. It means dragging the weight out of the dark and saying, I'm not carrying this alone anymore. And for the spouses, the unsung heroes, it takes immense strength to stand beside someone who's falling apart, and even more to set boundaries and still love them through the process. To say, I'm here, but I need support too. That takes guts. That's love in its rawest, realest form. So let's stop pretending PTSD is some rare thing. Let's stop glamorizing survival and start honoring healing. Let's celebrate the firefighter who puts in the work to get better. Let's lift up the spouses who walk that brutal road right alongside them. Because that kind of quiet courage, that's the kind that saves lives, marriages, and futures. And that deserves just as much respect, maybe more, than the job ever did. Today I'm stripping it all off with Gary and his wife, Wendy. Gary has been a firefighter in the Valley and paramedic for 20 years and a peer support team member for 4 years. Wendy also worked in the fire department for 22 years in admin, and she is also a photographer and business owner and prides herself in being a fire wife and now fire mom. Welcome to the show, you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining. So, Gary, I'd like to start with you, if maybe you can just kind of give a little bit about how you became a firefighter and first responder, what drove you to do that, and kind of what your journey was in starting with that.
Yeah, so I remember I think it was about 8th grade. One of my teachers made a comment that she thought I would be a good cop. So from 8th grade up, going through high school and then into college, I always wanted to be a cop. I did test 1 year for a local police department, didn't get it, and Wendy was working for a fire department and actually spoke to a fireman who used to be a cop. Mm-hmm. And he was like, tell him to come and ride with me. So I went to the station, rode along with him, and loved it. So then I tested with the fire department and ended up getting hired.
Nice. Okay. What was that like initially? Was that everything you thought it was going to be? Did you not know what to expect when you first started kind of going out on calls and doing the damn thing?
You know, I knew, so like just about everybody that gets hired in the fire department does ride-alongs. And then you do more than one ride-along. You do multiple ride-alongs. You end up seeing the calls that they go on, the fires, the EMS calls. So I kind of knew what I was getting into. For the call-wise, I did know what I was getting into, yeah.
Okay. When did you feel like shit's getting real? You know, how long had you been doing things where you started seeing some stuff where it was like, holy shit, I don't know that I knew I was signing up for this?
It wasn't until I had about 15 years on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And to go back when I did get hired, like I said, she was working for the fire department. And the day I got the call that I was going to go to the next academy, Wendy, I called Wendy and told Wendy, and she told me, she asked me, do me a favor, just don't change. I was like, and I thought, what the hell are you talking about? Why am I going to change? You know? But she had noticed guys coming through, young on the job, certain character, had more time on the job, turned into somebody else. We didn't know why. So she, just asked me not to change. And again, like I said, I had no idea what she was talking about. But it wasn't until about 15 years on when I went on a certain call, and I've had hundreds of these calls. It was a code, and it was an adult. And like I said, I've had hundreds of them, and it's typically when they're not breathing and their heart has stopped, or their heart's in maybe a funky rhythm. But going on this call, as we were there, I started like getting sick to my stomach. We worked the guy, we took him to the hospital, and it was closer to dinner time, and we hadn't cooked yet. So we were going to go eat out, but I was still just sick to my stomach and just thinking about this call. So we go to the restaurant, I order my food, and I'm thinking, like, I'm not going to eat. I can't eat. And we go back to the station, but I still bought it just in case I got hungry. But I still didn't eat dinner that night. But I kept thinking about this call. So then the next morning, we get off at 8 a.m. in the morning. I drive home, and I'm still thinking about this guy, and I don't know why, you know. So I get home, and I park in my driveway, and I call somebody on the job that I really trusted, and just told them, like, hey, man, we had this call, and for some reason, I can't stop thinking about it. It's bothering me, you know. So that's when I started
Noticing that it was affecting you.
It wasn't, I didn't notice that I had a problem. I just didn't know why I was thinking about this one, you know. So the next 2 shifts, I actually called out work sick. I was thinking, okay, I just need to sleep a little more. Maybe I need to start working out a little more. Maybe I need to take some supplements to help me, you know, maybe get better sleep, whatever. So I called out sick for those 2 shifts, and then I go back to work. And it wasn't like I was thinking about this call 24/7. It was more of, as soon as I heard the tones, I would remember and think about it. And then things, so I was a paramedic as well. And then things started getting to where I can't even give you an example of the type of call, but okay, your knee hurts. Maybe you should go to the hospital because you're not going to die. You're not going to die on me. Even though it's just your knee, you know, I know you're not going to die, but I don't want to see death again. So I just want you to go to the hospital. That was starting to get a little irrational. And months had gone by now, and then it started to get to where I started having nightmares about this call. And Wendy and I started thinking about this call more and more often. It wasn't just when the tones went off, but I would think about it like the whole time I was at work. And then it got to where I was thinking about it at work, and I was thinking about it at home. And it started to become 24/7 of this call. And I remember I was so mentally like exhausted from thinking of it. And another part that was like driving me crazy was that I saw a 3-year-old shot in the head, and I was able to move on from that. This is a grown adult. Like, why is this one bothering me? You know, like I said, I've been on tons of those. And so it would come to be at night, and Wendy and I would argue about this because it would be 7 p.m. at night, and I'm ready to go to bed. I'm so mentally exhausted from it. I'm ready to go to bed. And I would tell her, hey, let's go to bed. Well, she's like, I'm not tired yet. I don't want to go to bed. So we would argue about going to bed because I'm not going to tell her that I'm struggling.
Right.
But if she came in at 9 p.m. and woke me up, first thing I saw was that call.
And I didn't know.
Right. And so you're on the outside trying to,
Like,
wonder
sorry,
why
I
he's
woke you
acting
up.
weird.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, so she would come in, whatever time, her and the dogs would come in and wake me up, and I would think of it, and now I would be up for the rest of the night. Just can't stop. It was almost like a broken record. And even if she came in and didn't wake me up, if I woke up at 1 p.m., it was still the first thing that I saw when I woke up, and I would get up and go to the couch, but be up, just nonstop thinking about it. And so about 9 months went by, trying to figure out what the hell is going on. I'm not telling, nobody knew. Nobody at work knew. She had no idea. I remember driving on the freeway and I was still thinking about it. And I was like, hey man, you got a problem. And so I had actually looked into calling a counselor on my own, staying away from my department. I do not want them to know. And I did call around to a few and they're like, okay, we can see you in a month. No, I can't wait a month.
Right.
I need it now. So 9 months have gone by, and I call out of work again. And I had been calling out frequently. My occurrences started going up.
which was completely unlike him.
Right.
And so prior to that, I loved going to work. I loved helping people. I loved hanging out with my crew. And I loved the job. That happened. I hated the job. Wow. So 9 months went by, and I called out of work sick 2 shifts in a row. And if you call out for a 3rd shift in a row, you have to get a doctor's note on why you were out. And that 3rd shift was coming up, and I was like, I can't go back. I can't do it, And in the meantime, sorry to backtrack, just to give you an example of we went on a homeless gentleman on the side of the road begging for money or food, and somebody witnessed him fall and called us, and we went there, and he was drunk. He was so drunk, every time we stood him up, he would fall over. And he's right by a busy intersection, and I'm telling the guy, we got to take you to the hospital. You can't be here. You're going to get hit by a car. And he knew his rights. He was like, hey, I'm answering all your questions appropriately. You cannot take me. But he is drunk. So drunk, like I said, he couldn't stand. So I call our doctor, and I explained to him exactly what I have there, because I know he's going to get hit by a car, and I don't want that responsibility. So I called the doc and put it on the doc. And the doc was like, basically said, he's answering all your questions. You can leave him there. Well, that takes the responsibility off of me. Mm-hmm. But driving back to the station, I'm thinking to myself, these guys are going to talk shit about me. I called a doctor on a homeless person. Who does that? Mm. And I couldn't rationalize that, hey, that is the best thing for me as a paramedic, for my crew, for the city that I work for. I'm covering all of our bases. But I just thought they're going to talk crap about me. Who does that, And I had many instances of those throughout those 9 months. So like I was saying, I called out sick 2 shifts in a row. The 3rd one came about, and I just knew I couldn't go back. So I called out the 3rd shift in a row, and I was like, I have got to get help, And I called a facility that we have for, it's a health center, and I told them, I was like, hey, I can't go to work right now. I can't shut my mind off. What do I do? And they basically told me, we don't know. This is coming from a doctor. We don't know.
How long ago was this?
This was in 2020.
Okay.
And so I hung up the phone thinking what am I I don't know what to do. I'm going to quit my job because I don't want anybody to know, so I'd rather quit than anybody know. And the doctor ended up calling me back about an hour later. Mm-hmm. So he obviously asked around, and he said, why don't you call, we have a clinician. Why don't you call that clinician? And so I called her and explained everything to her, crying on the phone. I couldn't control my emotions. Mm-hmm. And she said, okay, we're gonna take care of it. And she asked me, do you want to find your own clinician, or do you want me to find one for you? And I said, no, I'm going to find my own. I'm going to stay as far away from you guys as possible. And I ended up finding a clinician that was going to get me in fairly quick. And I started seeing her. And she ended up, I can't remember if it was the first or second session I had with her. She's like, why don't you quit your job?
Yeah.
And I said, I will. Like, if nothing works, I will definitely quit. But let's work on everything first and see if I can get better. And I still had no idea what I was dealing with.
Yeah.
And she said, well, I think by the time we're done with you, you're going to want to quit. And I said, okay, well, let's try. And she said, you know, I got another first responder job at Home Depot, and he loves it. Why don't you go work in an office? And this is at work, she's telling me too. And I said, I don't have an office. My office is a fire truck.
Right.
And so she had no idea what we do for a living, you know.
She also didn't know what's at stake. Like, they have a pension, they have all these
Right,
things,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So if you leave early, you don't get that.
Right.
Like,
It's a big deal.
yeah, so she didn't have really a clue.
Yeah. And, you know, I went in to talk to her about this one specific call, and she wanted to do EMDR, which I'm all on board with EMDR. At the time, I didn't know what it was, and I thought it was foo-foo stuff. But she wanted to do it on, I didn't like to fly. And so, like, right off the bat, I don't trust her. Like, hey, I got bigger problems right now than, I'm not flying anywhere tomorrow.
Right.
So I ended up calling back our clinician, and I said, hey, I need somebody that knows what we do for a living. And she ended up hooking me up with another clinician in her office, and to this day, I still see her.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is back in 2020. Wendy, how long, like, did you see the signs for this coming on? Was this something that you saw kind of unfolding prior to when this actually occurred, or what did that look like from where you were sitting?
So I didn't know that they were signs, but I saw them early on, I would say 2 years of him being on the job. We were having a ton of trouble. We separated for about 3 months, you know, caused all this devastation with our kids. They were little, like all of that. And I didn't know they were signs of PTSD. I literally thought, he has a big head. He's a big fireman now. You know, he's an asshole. Like, I didn't know any of that. I didn't know what to look for. And like he had mentioned, I saw guys come through fire that were, you know, the greatest guys, as like they call them a red shirt, you know, bright-eyed and so excited to start this job. And then a few years later, some of them I would see and I'm like, that's a completely different person. But I had no idea why. I just thought, you know, that was just, I don't know, like a fluke or something. I didn't know, I had no idea. But with us, when, you know, when we separated, looking back, you know, how many years late, that was what, 17 years ago. That was a huge, like, red flag. Had I known then what I know now, I would say those were signs for sure. Like, back then, it was very devastating. Affected our kids a lot. To this day, I think it still affects my daughter. But after learning signs and symptoms and all of that, we learned about like secondary PTSD and how we can pass that on to our kids. And, you know, we create that environment that they don't know. They're just absorbing all this like negative and, you know, negativity and I don't know. So there's a lot of like guilt and shame and responsibility that I feel for that, because had I known sooner, maybe we could have saved our kids from that. But also living with someone like that had so many, I didn't know, again, like when he's talking about that 9-month period, I had no clue. I thought we were just having trouble again. I thought it was me. I thought he doesn't want to be with me. Like, we've been together since high school. He's bored. He's, you know, he's not in love with me anymore, like all of these things. And so we were basically living like roommates, you know. We had like a mutual respect, but there was nothing, it just felt empty.
Yeah.
But I internalized all of that. I thought it was me. He just doesn't want to be with me anymore. He doesn't want this family. He doesn't want like who I am, what I have to offer. And so I was kind of putting that on myself without knowing any different. So it just created more problems.
Right.
We just argued more and didn't like each other more. And it was miserable.
That's a rough time to not feel comfortable to speak with who's supposed to be your trusted confidant in that situation about what you're going through.
Right. And there's a persona that we want to carry. You know, I'm a strong guy. I should be able to handle that.
Yeah.
You know, of course I didn't want my crew to know, anybody in the fire department to know, because there's a big stigma behind it, but also I'm their protector, you know, and there's no way in hell I'm going to let them know. I'm going to deal with this myself. You know, not that we fix people's problems, but we get them to people that can fix their problems, you know, and we mitigate them en route or whatever. Well, I have a problem and I can fix my problem on my own, you know, until you realize I can't. And I hit rock bottom, you know, and so, yeah, I'm going to take care of it before she finds out.
Yeah.
The day he went to that very first appointment, I didn't even know about that. He's leaving and I'm like, where are you going? I have an appointment. I'm like, okay, is everything okay? And I immediately go to, you know, he's had thyroid cancer. So like I'm thinking those types of things. I had no idea what kind of appointment he had.
Yeah.
So I didn't even know. He came home and then he did share with me, you know, that one call I'm still thinking about, and it kind of all came out at that time. I did not know until the day he was going to that appointment with the first clinician that wasn't helpful.
You know, too, she brought up thyroid cancer. So I found out I got hired, found out I had thyroid cancer, found out that they couldn't hire me because I was currently having cancer. But leading up to that 15 years before that one call, we even talked about it like, hey, I need to deal with that thyroid cancer. I haven't dealt with that yet. Maybe that's why I'm having some of these problems. And granted, the thyroid cancer probably was part of it, but I think the other stuff, the PTSD, the injury of that was starting to set in with me. But I blamed it on the thyroid cancer because I can do this job.
Right.
I've been doing this job. Everybody else can do this job. Why can't I? You know? So we both were blaming it on the thyroid cancer, you know?
Did you feel like after you've kind of reconciled and done some of the work on this one specific instance that you're referring to, was it that or was that the straw?
That was a straw.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was, so the way we like to explain it too was like I have a cup in every call, put a marble in that cup. That last call was just I couldn't put that marble anywhere else, you know? And finally going to counseling and talking about that one call and doing EMDR with that one call, a bunch of other calls popped up, you know, that I never knew I had an issue with, but I did. And for me, there was always a theme with them, you know, families involved. I talked to family members. I've seen their reaction, you know, and a lot of people ask, and I just got asked this last week, what was the worst call you've ever seen? You know, granted, we see stuff we should not see. However, it's the reaction of the families that I can't deal with. You know, that's way harder than seeing a body down there, you know, so.
The screams, like those are haunting, you know, the mom that lost the baby, those screams, those kind of things are what he remembers, you know.
Do you feel like it's gotten better as far as people in that industry being able to talk about it, or is it still very, we'll deal with it very quietly or not, or I've got this? Do you feel like it's still that, or do you feel like it's gotten any better?
I think it's gotten a little bit better. But it's the stigma behind it.
Yeah.
And I actually read an article that those 6 words or 6 letters, stigma, is what's killing firemen. You know, they don't want to ask for help because they don't want to be labeled weak or what's wrong with them. We are talking about it more, but I think we could do much more about it and even get in front of it. You know, like I talked about PTSD, I think we all experience that in the fire service. And with me, if I would have, we've gone on people with PTSD all the time, and I always treated people good. But But in my mind, I'm thinking, this has got to be fake. I don't understand it. You know, I knew nothing about it.
Right.
I didn't know I had PTSD until I saw my second counselor. She's the one that finally told me, hey, you have PTSD, you know. But I knew nothing about it. And if I would have known about it prior to, you know, that call happened and I had all this training on PTSD signs and symptoms, hey, maybe what I'm experiencing is what they've been teaching me, you know, and it would have stayed an injury. But because I did not ask for help, I allowed it to become a disorder, the D in PTSD.
How were you raised as far as emotionally with your parents? Was that something where you were encouraged to express your emotions? Was it something where, you know, we've talked about a lot on this show, stop being a pussy, suck it up, you know, is that the culture that you were raised in as well?
Yeah, my dad, my parents were both great. I have no complaints about my parents at all. And, you know, we talk about a lot of people in the fire service that bring in baggage. Like, I don't feel like I had a lot of baggage coming in. But my dad was the same way I was with my boy. You get hurt, rub some dirt on it. You hit one home run, you could have hit two if you did this, you know. So
God, it is rough with you men. I'm telling you, like, the more I dive into this stuff, and it's not your fault, so please don't take it that way, because I absolutely adore men, but it is, I feel for you guys. I sit across the couch from people who, you know, I had a gal whose husband killed himself because it's, just be strong, We're not supposed to talk about it. Well, let's fucking talk about it. You know, let's have it so that we normalize that shit instead of expecting our men to have no resources, no outlet, no speaking about stuff, no even being able to just have a good cry by yourself, right? Like, where is any of that? None of that. It's, you're a pussy if you do that. You can't handle it. Like you said, the whole stigma for things. You know, it's what drives me to have these conversations. It's because I don't want that to be a thing. I don't want anyone to feel like they're isolated and they're dealing with the weight of the world all on their own, right? Or that we're passing that on to our kids, right? I mean, we watch as we've done that.
No, you're right. And so when I was struggling, I was so irrational that I seriously thought I am the only fireman that was struggling. And knowing what I know back now and looking back at my career, I've seen it throughout my entire career from so many different people, you know. So yeah, and back to how my parents were with me. Like we were talking about earlier, she was pregnant when I was in high school, and I had football practice and I was running off the field, and my dad was there, and he had just found out that she was pregnant. And he shook his head no at me and looked at me as I ran off, never said another word, and supported me ever since, you know. So they were really good. Yeah.
How were your parents growing up? Did you have siblings, Wendy?
No.
Okay.
I'm an only child.
Okay.
I have half siblings now from my dad's. My dad had kids, but they're the same age as my kids.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Interesting, fun dynamic. Yeah.
So single mom for most of my life. My mom got married when I believe, if I remember correctly, I think I was 13. But he was gone a lot. He was a truck driver, so he wasn't home very much. And also, you know, my mom's was more of, I was her daughter, not his. So she was still pretty much kind of handling things. So, yeah.
Do you feel like in your house, do you talk about that with your kids now? Has your healing journey kind of been something that you share with your children or with other people, right? I mean, you talked about it wasn't something that you kind of talk about in the fire department, but is it something that you're more open to talk about now just because you do see what?
100%. I tell anybody and everybody that asks. Her and I have done a video for the fire department kind of showing what we've gone through a little bit. And I'm open about it. And what I like about it is, so I'll say I had a great reputation prior to this. And I think I still do.
Right.
Because I always did the right thing. I worked hard. You know, I was a good employee. People wanted to work with me. And it's a little different in the fire service because we actually have to live with people. And are you a good roommate, you know? So I will say I lived my interview throughout my entire career. So now a lot of younger members that looked up to me call me when they're struggling, you know, and that's what I really like about it now. And so I'm so open about it. But I think the main reason why I'm open about it is because my son's a fireman. And I actually asked him to quit. You know, I do not want him to deal with this, what I dealt with, you know. And just the fire service itself is changing to where cancer is more prevalent now. Mental health, it's being talked about, so we're seeing a lot more of it. And I want better for him, you know. And so, like I said, I sat him down. I was like, dude, why don't you quit, man? It's not worth it in the long run, you know. And he's like, Dad, I'm having a good time. And I remember that, you know. And so I said, okay, bub, like, I get that. We have all these resources right here. You need to use them before you get to where I got, you know. So, yeah, I'm wide open about it. And I, you know, we want to become a fireman, and one of the reasons why is to help people. I still get to do that, but it's my own members, you know, and even people that I don't know, but all within the fire or police departments, you know. So yeah, I'm wide open about it.
Well, and you speaking about it, I don't think you can even get your head around the value that brings, right? Because someone hears you or sees you, right, and you're a big guy, big strong guy, and being able to say, like, talking about that and how helpful that is, or the other modalities that you've done to kind of heal some of that stuff, where all of this time that you have as firefighters back at the station, right? What if you actually had things that were implemented where you could talk about the shit that you saw, right? And process the stuff that you saw as that was happening. And I don't know if they're getting better about doing that, but if you're not, fire departments, whoever's in charge, do better, right? Because you guys are putting your lives on the line to serve and to be, right, the guys that are out there, the guys and gals that are out there that are taking care of us. We should be taking care of you on the backside of that, so that isn't such a stigma, and that isn't something where we don't talk about it. You're in a peer support. Tell me about what that looks like, and is that something that was there before or something that's new now? What, you know, what does that look like?
It was there before, but again, it was still a tool that was never utilized. And or if it was, so I can give you an example. We have a criteria of certain calls that go on: a drowning, a pediatric code, pediatric trauma. There's, I don't know, a list of calls that go out where there's automatically a text that goes out maybe to our clinician or the peer support lead. And okay, this crew, these are all the people that went on this drowning. Hey, we need to call them and find out how they're doing the next day. So we do call them. Hey, I heard you went on this call yesterday. How you doing, man? But we're tuned to say, I'm doing good, even though I might not be, you know? And so something that I like to do when I call these guys, hey, I heard you had this call yesterday, man. How you doing? How's your crew doing? Oh, I'm doing good. Good. That's good to hear. Hey, man, I had a call that fucked me up.
Yeah.
Like, I know it's okay to say this call bothered me, you know, and she knows about a lot of the calls that we've been on. And I know in the past, I went on a family that was run over right in the middle of the street, and we had the 4-year-old daughter who was a trauma code. We get back to the station. Hey, you good? Yeah, I'm good. But we're all in a separate corner of the back parking lot calling home upset, you know. But like I said, things are getting better to where I had a drowning, and riding back to the station, the captain who leads the crew and everybody's going to follow their example was like, hey, guys, we're going home tonight.
Yeah.
You know, and I thought to myself, am I going home? You know what? I would want my son to go home. So, yeah, I'm going home because I'm setting that example for him, you know. So it is changing. It is getting better. There is still a big stigma behind it, you know, but it's moving in the right direction.
You know, you leading with vulnerability and saying, I had a call that fucked me up too, when you're talking to somebody, that to me, I think does so much for either the younger guys or just other people who didn't feel like they could say that, right? Because you can share your story with them and say, I felt so much better when I was able to process this, it doesn't even have to be with a clinician. Yes, it can be, right? But even just speaking with other people, speaking with your wife, speaking with your son, speaking with, right? And you want to be able to, your son's a firefighter, you want to be able to show him how to process this in a healthy way as it's happening, instead of just like the marbles in the jar like you talk about, because you get to a place where it's like, I don't have any more room to put this. What does that even look like? Yeah. You really could have imploded your entire life. I mean, it was already bad enough the way that it was, but you know, you see these people that they don't have an outlet to be able to speak about that because everybody has to be so strong. So it does take the bravery of being able to to be vulnerable in front and show emotion. You know, it's something where I was raised in around the same time where it was, you know, I was in my family on the tomboy side of it. That looked a lot easier to me. I didn't want the emotional, messy stuff that my mom brought to the table. I was like, nah, I'm with these guys, you know? And so it was just no emotion, right? You just push it down. I'm fine. Everything's fine. Until it's not fine, right? Because I had a bunch of bullshit that happened that I didn't deal with. And so you just keep pushing it down until something gives, right? And so being able to be vocal about that and share that with people so that they don't get to that point, because you don't want that for your son.
No.
You don't want that for your you know, brothers and sisters that are at the fire station. You don't want that for them. You don't want that. You saw that, you know, like you said, somebody's bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and a couple years later, it's like, holy shit, what happened to this one, you know? But it's over and over and over again. This is not how we should be taking care of our folks. But everyone's scared to be able to stand up and say the hard things, right? That's why for me, it's so important to have these conversations, to say, you know what, it's okay. It does. It takes guts and it takes courage to be able to say, man, I'm fucked up right now, right? This is really messing with me. And being able to do that, it lets somebody else, either listening that didn't speak up, or someone that can come back also and say, yeah, this is getting me too, you know? But that first person, right? That first person that speaks up, that's brave shit.
Yeah. You know, and as a fireman, like, we compare, right? So I'll hear somebody else talking at a conference and they were involved in a shooting, or they got shot, or they pulled 9 dead bodies out. You know, I compare and like, well, okay, I can understand that they have PTSD, but I shouldn't have it for that one call, you know? But now that I'm open about it and learned what I've learned, I had people come up to me. I work for a small department, man, and we don't run calls like you. I shouldn't have it. Yeah, you should have it. It doesn't matter. You know, my cup might only be 20,000 marbles and yours might be 40 or 10,000. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
And we don't know when we're going to get to that point, you know, and throughout our careers, that point is going to change too. For instance, I had a call where big kid in a car crunched dead. We couldn't even get him out. Looked like my son. You know, my son was 26 at the time. That's going to affect me way more than going on a 3-year-old. And that's sad to say, but it's going to, you know. And now that we have our grandbaby, baby calls are going to affect my son more than they did 2 years ago. Yeah. So that's all, your cup's always changing, and you just don't know when or where, but I guarantee you it's going to happen.
Right. Well, and I think just even talking about it, like having that be something that's encouraged back at the station, of being able to talk with each other about stuff instead of feeling like you got to be the tough guy. Yeah. Nobody has to be the tough guy, right? We were raised that way, and I totally get that. For a lot of us, we were raised that way. But we know, right? We know better now. We know what that looks like. We understand, hey, just keep being tough and being strong and being whatever. What does that get you?
No, nowhere. And something that I've noticed, and I can only talk about my own personal experience on this, is the tough guy is probably struggling more than I am. Because the things that I know now, the drinking, the drugs, the divorces, the anger, the blowing up on other people are typically the ones that are talking shit about the guys that struggle. And they should be sitting next to me talking about the same thing that I'm talking about.
1,000%.
Yeah.
Well, you watch, and it's like the emotional intelligence component of stuff, right? I always liken it to like the big tough guy that's driving the car, right? Or driving the truck, and he's pissed off in traffic and he can't regulate his emotions. Well, where the fuck do you think that came from? Just out of curiosity, right? Because men were not raised to be able to handle their emotions at all. Yeah. None of them. They don't even know how to identify them, you know? So if you feel hurt, if you feel sad, if you feel anything, you turn it into anger and rage. Yeah. And then it's like, oh, there he is. That's the tough guy, you know, whatever. Nobody needs any more tough guys. Yeah. You know, the tough guy doesn't even want to be the tough guy, right? I've sat across on this couch with a bunch of guys that don't want to be tough guys, that realize, hey, this sucks. You know, somebody that talks about, look at all of this shit that I've been through. You don't have to muscle through it. There's no award at the end that says like, oh, you made it through. You wrecked your entire fucking family because they don't know which version of dad they're going to get coming home, because you didn't know how to handle your emotions for stuff. You in your profession happen to deal with a lot more shit than regular people do. But just in regular life, like, people don't realize, they think they're holding it together what do you think that does for the wife or the kids, the dad that's holding it all together? He's not holding it together. He's an asshole, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're a complete asshole. No offense to you specifically
right.
here, but that's what that looks like, you know? And so it's like, that's what you think is the way to do that, is we're going to be the tough guy and not talk about stuff, but then your wife doesn't know what the fuck's happening in your life, and your kids are afraid of you and don't know which version they're going to get of you. I've watched it happen in my own household, right? I mean, growing up and in my own household because we don't deal with that. We don't encourage men to deal with their shit or to talk about it.
Right.
So it's like, if you looked at that and you said, these are your options. You can either have someone that's going to speak about their shit and deal with it as it comes up, or you're going to have mystery dad who you're not sure what you're going to get. That should say everything you need to know.
Right.
You don't want to be that person to
No.
your kids, right? You don't want to be saddled up next to that guy. We do it. We all do it, right? That's why it's so important to raise our boys in a different way now, no matter what age that looks like, right? Like, I look at the impact that I've had on my son and on my daughters, right? Because I didn't show emotion until I got sober when I was 40. So I raised up to 20-year-olds with, don't be emotional. That's a sign of weakness, right? Now I'm paying for it because now I got to come on the show and, show all the vulnerability. I am fine to do that because that's part of my mission now. But that's what it is for everybody. We're supposed to show emotion. We're supposed to show each other, and now being able to like heal in front of my kids, they have a front row seat to that. Yes, they're having to undo some of the programming and the messed up stuff that I handed to them, but thank God.
Right.
I look at I have an 18-year-old son who is the most emotionally intelligent man I've ever met, right? And I love that. I love that my husband allows this and is like coming along with, because I've been planting seeds for years. It's like, it actually feels pretty cool. It's pretty good to be able to say, God, get curious about, why did that make me feel that way? What am I going to do with that?
Yeah.
Tell me about, I read in your questionnaire that you had a journey with ketamine. Will you share some of that with me? Because I think that's one of the things that I haven't tried. I'm always the cannonballer. So I'm like, all right, let me try all of these things, That is one I haven't done, but I've done all sorts of other things. But I've talked to people that have shared that that's very helpful for them.
It was very helpful. It was I will say it was the most amazing thing I've ever done, and also the most horrifying thing at the same time. Yeah. And a lot of things that I'm going to say about it, you're not going to really understand. But so there's a local organization, the Arizona Hunter Club, phenomenal organization. They help pay for mental health stuff for first responders. So there was a ketamine clinic in the Valley in Scottsdale that was doing a trial. They wanted 30 first responders to start it and see some of the results they get. So I was asked if I wanted to be part of that 30, and I really didn't want to. I still was kind of in that mindset of firemen, police officers, we live in worst case scenario. So the worst is always going to happen. I never did drugs. I was not a big drinker. I didn't really want to do it, but I thought I might as well try it because all these people that have helped me asked me to try it. I might as well do it. So I go in, and my first 3 sessions were like horrifying. And these docs, like, they have it down to a science. They know for the most part how things are going to be. And they told me sessions 1 and 2 are going to be your past. Sessions 3 and 4 are going to be your present, and 5 and 6 are going to be your future. So I remember going into my first one, and it could have been my first or second session. Like, I had like a slideshow of all these calls that I have not thought about ever again. I remembered my very first gunshot wound as a probationary fireman. I haven't thought of that call in, 17 years at the time. But I remember seeing slideshow after slideshow of all these horrific scenes. And I remember thinking to myself in it, like, this is too much for you, Gary. This is just too much for you to see. This is too much for anybody to see, And I remember thinking, like, I don't need to see this anymore. Like, I've been there, done that. I don't need to see that kind of stuff anymore. And I remember getting angry during my session. You have 100% control over yourself. But I remember getting angry thinking, like, how did I get here? Why didn't I know that this was a possibility of getting here, So I had those, and I can't recall right now the 2 middle ones. But But it was my fifth one. Going into my fifth one, the docs, they're like, hey, do you want to go to outer space? And I'm like, oh, crap, what are you talking about? Like, am I going to go there? The room was called the outer space room. So I was like, oh, okay, that's why you're saying it. Now, this time, the first 4, you're in a recliner. They start the IV. They slowly push it. You're listening to these sounds in your ears. You're blacked out. You can't see anything. But the fifth one, now you're in a bed, and the bed vibrates to the sounds in your ears. And I remember the doctor telling me, Gary, I think you're going to like this one. But I have no idea what to expect. And during my fifth one, right off the bat, as soon as they start pushing it, I think I passed away. And I think I died, and it's to the point where I am crying like I have never cried before in my life because I was never going to see them again, and I felt 2 million miles away, and being 2 million miles away is telling me you are too far gone to return. There's no returning in this. So I went for about 30 minutes just bawling my eyes out, knowing that I was going to heaven, that I had passed away. And they put this little button on your chest to where if you want them to come in, you can press this button. So at the same time that I think I'm dead and 2 million miles away, I still know to press this button to have them come in. So they came in and they said, did you press the button? I said, yeah, am I okay? And they said, yeah, you're perfectly fine. And I said, okay. And they said, can we restart the infusion? And I said, yeah, go ahead. Boom, I'm dead again, 2 million miles away. And I'm thinking, she's in the waiting room. She's going to see Scottsdale Fire come in here, and they're going to start CPR any second because I am dead. It was the most amazing experience I've ever felt in my life because when it was said and done, docs did not come in right away like they typically do. They let me sit there and take it in a little bit longer. And they came in, and I said, that was fucking amazing. Yeah. And they said, we told you were going to like this one. Yeah. And they knew I was going to die. And they said, typically people die on their fifth one, and the people that fight the medicine will not have that same experience. Well, part of ketamine with this specific clinic, and I think this is the most important part, it comes with a ketamine coach. They're not in the facility with you. I'm in the room all by myself. I talk to them the very next day. I write down everything that I can remember. And I told this lady, I said, I died in it. And I said, it was the most amazing thing I've ever experienced. I felt so at peace. And she said, that was the death of your ego. And without her, I wouldn't have known that, I went into ketamine as a fucked up fireman. And I came out a husband, a father, a brother, a son. I just so happened to be trained a fireman, and it messed with me. That's totally fine. Like, I totally switched my priorities in life to where up until that point, my priority was being a fireman, and I need to be ready to go back to work. And if that means my first day off, I need to rest because we were up all night. My second day off, I need to rest because I go back to work tomorrow. They were second. But that switched it to where now they're going to be first. And that's going to come when it comes. No longer is that my priority. But the call that took me over that broke the camel's back never came up. So I had dealt with that with EMDR. My sixth session, I was hoping to go in and die again because it was the most amazing thing. And I go in there, and it was about me and her. So they were right. 1 and 2 are your past, 3 and 4 are your present, 5 and 6 are your future. And like number 6 was just like, thank God I have her, So yeah, it was the most amazing thing. And we talk about EMDR. I view ketamine as EMDR 2.0. Like you go into EMDR knowing, hey, I have this call that I need to deal with. Ketamine, you have no idea which one you're going to deal with.
Right.
So it's maybe your subconscious that you don't even know is still there, taking up room, not filed away properly. Ketamine allowed all these extra calls that I had no idea to be filed away properly. And I told them there at the clinic, like, you guys need to take this to Disneyland. It was the most amazing ride I have ever been on. Yeah. And I still to this day don't do marijuana. I don't do any drugs. I would do ketamine in a heartbeat, only in that setting. Yeah. Never,
right.
outside.
No, I understand exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. But it is like, that's powerful shit. Like I went down to Costa Rica and did ayahuasca and same thing, death of my ego. And I'm a completely different person from one side of that to the other in the best possible way, right? I realize it's not about me, right? That's the whole ego personality that we feed. That in general, most people's are just completely out of control.
Yeah.
right? And so to be able to really kind of put that into check and to understand what you're important, what's important to you.
Yeah. And it's so like we had a workbook, we had to write down our notes, and then having the ketamine coach, like I said, without the ketamine coach, I would not have known it was the death of my ego. And to this day, shame still kicks in every now and then, but I have to remember what I wrote down, what's important to me, what's best for me and her and my kids and my family, not what's best for anybody else.
Right.
This is my priority. So I still have to remind myself that, and remind myself that when the mental health stuff, that shame starts kicking in a little bit too, but I would say the overall going through all of that, the ketamine, the counseling has made me a better person today, the person that I want to be, so.
The ketamine, I think, saved our marriage, but I think it saved his life.
I believe that. I believe that.
One thing he didn't mention is that he was suicidal.
Yeah.
And I remember that 5th treatment, because I took him to every single treatment. We're sitting in the truck. I would get him a coffee. So he had his coffee, and he's like, let's just sit here for a minute. So we're sitting, I'm looking at him, and I could see in his eyes, like there was light. It wasn't as dark as it had been for so long. And I remember just thinking, like, this was the one. This one saved him. It was so crazy. And since the ketamine, I feel like our relationship has been 1,000 times better. We've been able to talk to our kids about all of this and kind of apologize for all the fucked up shit that we did to them and, all of the hurt that we caused them, even though we weren't trying to do that, like just the unknown and try to repair those relationships. And now trying to help them, my son, don't repeat these things, go to, do all the things. And my daughter struggles with anxiety really bad. And I feel so responsible for that because it didn't start until we separated. And so she still has those symptoms. We actually had her do ketamine. I did ketamine because I have my own trauma.
Yeah, sure.
But I went into ketamine hoping I had that same experience that Gary had. But the doctors ended up telling me, you didn't need the death of your ego. Your family has always come first. So it was very eye-opening for me because I always felt second. He was a firefighter before he was anything else. He would give 110% at work and come home and give shit.
Whatever was left over.
And I just kept taking it because I just had this idea of family. It was me and my mom.
Yeah.
I didn't want my kids to have a broken family. I'm gonna work as hard as I can to keep this marriage, whatever that looks like. I gave all of myself, and I always felt it was never good enough. But once he did the ketamine, it's crazy how fast our marriage switched because he now viewed us as first. And that's all I ever prayed for.
Right.
Like, I just want to be, that I want to be that person. I want to be number one. I'm tired of being second. I'm tired of feeling like shit all the time. I'm tired of this marriage. Do I want to fight for it? Do I want to leave?
Yeah.
Like, what's best for my kids? This isn't good for my kids, but what, it was a lot of years of just struggling with what do I do?
Right.
I don't want to hurt my kids, but I feel like we're hurting them staying together. But that ketamine, I could see it. I knew in my heart. When I saw the light in his eye, I was like, this was it.
Yeah.
Things are going to change.
Well, it's so powerful too. You mentioned that you were talking with your kids and really like showing your kids and apologizing to your kids, taking accountability. As we're raising kids, and you guys were both young parents, we're just doing the best that we can, right? And if we aren't able to do that, right, it just continues to perpetuate that. Our kids are our biggest teachers in life, right, if you'll let them be. Our egos get in the way a lot of times because we're supposed to be these big, tough people that don't need help from our children. My kids are my biggest teachers, but I also had the same thing where I really had to have a come to Jesus, where I realized my family always got the scraps of what was left over too. And I think, what a shame. And there's nothing I can do about it. So I don't have guilt and shame associated with it, because to me that's garbage that those are such low vibe emotions I'm not dragging through. But having that ability and the, being able to take accountability to your kiddos and show them that that's what we're supposed to do, and then put them first instead of they get the crumbs that are left over when I'm done at the end of the day, right? I thought I was doing the right thing by, I'm going to go out and make a bunch of money so that anytime they want something, they can ask. But I never paid full attention, right? I never was plugged into them. It was always, what am I doing over here? And then I would get home at the end of the day and then give my scraps to my husband and my kids. And I look back at that and it's just like, God, I was out to lunch. I was so fucking out to lunch, And to be able to realize it doesn't have to be that way, right? Look at all of this good that's come from that. Look at all that's good that's come from that. You guys are able to be on the same team and be each other's champions, each other's cheerleaders, each other's talk about all the shit that's, then you have a partner in crime instead of, I'm just going to carry all of this weight all by myself. Because you look at it and you look at, what did that do to Wendy? You didn't even realize when you were going through all of this that she was internalizing all of that and thinking it was her, right? And beating herself up about not being everything that you needed or whatever that looks like. I look at my relationship with my husband and I think it's crazy because we talk about all the things, right? It hasn't always been like that. Thank God that it is now, because I don't want to do it any other way. I want to be able to say, I felt like shit today. I didn't bring my best, I didn't have 100% to give today, or here are the things that I felt that I dealt with, or here are the things that I'm processing, or whatever that's making me feel like. You connect with another human being on a level that just blows my mind, right? I'm assuming you guys are experiencing the same thing, because I don't want to have something that's going on that I'm not able to share with my partner. I want to say all the things.
Right.
What do you do, Gary, to kind of keep keep things in check, right? Keep your wellness and your mental health at the forefront. Like, what are the things that you do now that you have your eyes open to all of the things?
So I still see my counselor.
Okay.
Maybe once a month, 2 times a month. It varies. I wish I would have done that years ago, Another thing is, like I was talking about the ketamine, I remember that feeling and I remember what I wrote down. And I got to remind myself, not that I have to remind myself that they're important, but when that ego starts creeping back in, okay, what's best for you, Gary, and what's best for your family? I have to remind myself of that. I have to know my boundaries too, so I enjoy talking about firefighter mental health, but I can't do it every day,
right.
And I have to set that aside too. So yeah, I talk with her. She's really big now into first responder mental health, for the new department that she's working for, pushing a lot of stuff for them. So, I go to the gym now to where I worked out prior to all this, but that is my time to go in and shut my mind off, and so like I make that a priority for myself. We try to eat better, just everything, so yeah.
Yeah, it's important because we lose sight of it. You have to be vigilant about staying on top of it, because I can feel that the ego start to creep in too. And also just not taking care of myself in all of the ways. If I start feeling off, I have a checklist of, am I journaling? Am I, have I been doing these things, whatever it is that kind of makes you feel like yourself.
Yeah.
Because it gets out of check quickly. So, well, thank you guys for coming today and sharing your story. We're coming to the end of our time, but powerful conversation.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's our time for today. Please do all the things to support the pod. Rate, review, share. If you have suggestions or questions, our email address is ladies@letsgetnakedpodcast.com. We will catch you next week. That's a wrap.
I'd love to help you get vulnerable. Let's get naked.